Did I break it? Yes, it's working. All right, welcome. My name is Marcin Samsonowski, and I would like to talk to you about design as a code. So I'm really excited to be here, especially because it's been a while from the time I hit the stage for the last time. So very nice. I would like to talk to you about design as a code today, and first I'm going to introduce myself. I'm an architect in banking in one of the largest banks here in Poland, and also a 7N consultant. I put this logo also to remember that I have some goodies for you, so pay attention, and if you ask some questions, then I will be happy to give them away. So I'm also a trainer for 10 years now, and academic teacher. I work at university also. Yes, so I've been in IT for like 15 years in diverse roles, and that led me to the point that I understood what excites me the most is holistic understanding of processes and organizations. So those are my topics that I focus most. Software development lifecycle and the secure version of that, right? Standardization and regulations, and believe me, that's a lot of those things in the banking. Also engineering and practices in software development, like design patterns. Yes, quality testing, automation. So before we talk design, let's introduce the SDLC acronym. I guess everybody knows this one, but can you help me with that? What's the shortcut for? Yes, I just mentioned that in the previous slide, and who was that? Yes, that's gonna be the easy one. Can you pass to the colleague? Yeah. All right, so the next ones won't be so easy, I promise. So SDLC, here's the cycle, or at least one version of that, because you probably know different versions and many versions. So let's not get too much into details of which one is that. Is it like waterfall or V-model or iterative? Let's just focus on the stages here. Just to recap from the beginning, right? So we do some primary analysis of the needs, and then collect requirements, try to understand them, and when the client's requirements were analyzed, we can focus on architecture. Then we produce working code, right? Just in short, and testing. Finding bugs before they become problems. Then we bring it to life and make sure it lives a good life, right? So now we are on the same page. And before starting the journey that I promised you, like I know how I would finish this sentence if that would be in Polish, because I know how many people play Baldur's Gate in Polish version. Yeah. Hermetic joke, Mołdów, all right. Yeah, so development, that's the next step. Well, actually, we should start from the beginning, but let's start from the middle, because why not? So documenting software, how do you do it? Like honestly. ADRs, all right? How many people use ADRs? Yeah, then we can skip for the next 5 minutes. No, I'm joking. Only a couple hands up. All right. So yes, good documentation. What it should be? Short documentation and clear, probably. Yes. And what more? Okay. So nobody said my favorite thing yet, so I'll just move to the next slide, and we'll get back to that later. So let's consider some scenarios. The first one, programmer adds some code, the product code, and then also adds some comments. So what do you think about that? What kind of documentation is that? Like, is it good or not? Depends. So, okay, so here's my understanding. So only developers look into code. And also developers, if they like their job, they should care to write the code that is documenting itself, right? So there's no way they will be also writing more comments. And also the pessimistic version is they're too lazy to write code. And another problem with that is limited scope, because we can only put some comments that are on a particular level we want to document in the code, and not all the documentation that we would like to have. Okay, so that's one scenario. There's another one. You work on some product code, and then write some commit messages. Do you like this kind of documentation? All right, so here's the thing. It's hard to find any details, right, when you need them with only commit messages. So no documentation, in my opinion. There's one more scenario, which is after adding some production code. Yes. So you have any kind of like wiki or Azure DevOps or any software designed for that. And you just use that for keeping documentation on like wiki. What do you think about this one? You like it? All right. So yeah, in my experience, we won't have that actual documentation because we don't have any validation for that usually, and yeah, I wouldn't trust too much to that documentation. And yeah, so going back, my favorite part about documentation is it being up to date. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's for me no go. If it's not, then it's not the documentation that you can trust. And of course, we could go on and on about clearness, what you mentioned before, and yes, being sufficient, describing all the factors that are interesting and important. But the most important part, in my opinion, is being up to date. So how do you achieve it? How about keeping docs generated from the code? So you, on one hand, have it in code, but it's also generated to another place in the form that is easier to understand, for example, for everybody. No comments? So glad you asked how you do that. And can't see any hands up. So meet our toolbox and the first member, that's Markdown. How many of you heard of Markdown? Yeah, I was going to say less than ADR, but I'll keep that. So yes, and this is only an example, because there are also alternatives for Markdown. And for those of you thinking that Markdown is too much at this point to introduce, it's just an example, and we will keep that in mind also on the other stages when we'll be discussing working with documents. So just a few words about Markdown. That's a markup language, and it converts text to HTML, and it's supported widely in software, which is, for example, GitHub or Atlassian or Azure DevOps. And also my favorite, some cool plugins also for Visual Studio Code. One I stated here that I use. So Markdown. Here's an example. Can you see it, or is it like the contrast is not so good for you? Is it okay from the back? Okay. So Visual Studio Code. I don't know if you agree with me, but it's easy to understand on the right-hand side, but also good for those code-minded people writing it. I prefer to write the stuff like this. Okay, so let's move to the next one. So real-life scenario. We want the documentation to be synchronized with product code in the same repository. And also we have multiple versions of product, like APIs, for example. And we are adding functionalities, for example, and it's available only from version 3, right? And it wasn't there for version 2. So we need to keep, and both are supported. So we need to keep different versions of documentations. So good luck with that, not having the code for product and for documentation kept together. And I mean here no version control and no synchronization, right? And is there any tool support? Anybody? So meet DocuSaurus, that's another member. Also, yes, with friends, because that's not the only tool doing that. There are also other examples, but we'll focus on this one. How it works. Okay, there's a lot on this slide, but let's go through this. So we have a catalog in the repository, and it's dedicated only to documentation, right? And then you keep markdown files that you work with on daily basis, like with product code. And then DocuSaurus kicks in, generates static pages from markdown files, and then it translates also the structure of the documents that you have to the structure of pages being generated in the documentation. And it supports also version control and search and validation. And I mean here, for example, when you move pages, the links get updated, right? Or also you can validate if a particular part of the product code has been, particular part of the documentation according to changes in product also been made, right? So you need to adjust this part of documentation if you change this component, for example. All right. And it's widely known on the market. It's open source. Yes, have some nice features also. And the bottom line, explicitly, renders Markdown means supports Markdown. So all the stuff, or most of the stuff that we'll cover later, it's also supported here in the documentation with DocuSaurus. Okay. Yeah, and simply, if you publish new version of the package or API, it just takes snapshot from the documentation and puts it as a new documentation folder. All right. Yes. Is there anything wrong with that? With this solution? What you don't like about this? What I just described? Yes. Yes. So is it what's wrong with that, or you're fine with it? Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yes. So yeah. Well, there's no tool for everything, right? It always depends. Yes. If somebody gives you an answer for every question, it's not really an answer. Yes. So, but anybody else? What's wrong with this solution to keep documentation this way? What are the drawbacks? So each documentation update requires from you to go through code, right? And pull request. So you not always want that, right? You sometimes just want to update documentation without having the whole team looking at the pull request and deciding if it's okay or not, right? Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Here's an example, how it looks like, the simple demo from the official site. So on the left-hand side, you have a Markdown, then there is HTML, and the page itself generated on the right-hand side with menus and links and yes. Nice. What do you mean, like in the structure? Well, I mean, you can do everything with that, but do you want that? Do you want to combine? Yeah, the recommendation is to have a specific folder for that separately, but in the same repository, because then it's easier to reason what's what. Yeah, but you can do that for sure. Yeah. All right. So a journey that I promised you. So now we know already that it's important to keep docs with code, or like, can we agree on that, or any comments? No. So when we agree on that, we can proceed with a for promise journey. And the idea for our journey will be this: a simple application for conference registrations. How original, right? Right? Yeah. Yes. Before we go to design phase, first two stages, shortly. Yes, planning and requirements. So we can keep them as user stories, for example, on the Atlassian or Azure DevOps, right? We can also use sophisticated data formats for that. But if not, yes, why we shouldn't use, like, for example, simple text format or Markdown for that? It's already supported. You can even put it on Wiki or Azure DevOps. Just food for thoughts. And why would we do that? Okay, let's get back to that later, if no hands up. So, planning first. We have two options. Which one you choose? First or second? Anybody? Second, right. Okay. So we have that conference registrations application, both in web and mobile. And now we have some basic requirements. We won't continue on this, just some basic ones to start with. Yes. So now we are in design. And that's actually the phase that is mostly interesting for us today. We have design and in the code, as a code in the title, right? So we already introduced the as a code. Now it's a design part. So when I say design, what do you think? Like, what's that about? It also depends on the role you are in, right? But what's that for you, design? We like to use the words like design and architecture, right? But what's that? Yeah. Did you get the one already? Yeah, I won't give you another one. Sorry. Yeah. Yes. It depends on the role. Anybody skipped here? Oh, yeah. So those are some roles involved in this design phase. And based on this, you will be interested in different parts of design. So it's basically translation or transformation, more accurately, from requirements to some kind of blueprint, which would be implementation details. And in formal way, that's a document called us, and yes, software requirements specification, which consists of the things listed. The first one we already covered in some way, And you can use for that, for example, Markdown. But let's focus on the next ones, especially architecture and data design. So what might be useful? You think probably diagrams, right? Well, yeah, not only diagrams. There's also architecture in that part. What's architecture? Functionality of the flow. All right, that's one answer. Anybody else? All right, yeah, I like that one. So I know some people believing that architecture is everything, and I somehow understand them. And I won't go philosophical here, but I could. And you will find diverse definitions of architecture. I have my own. That's everything supporting understanding and communicating about the whole part, which would be a system or ecosystem or organization, because you also have different levels, right, of architecture. You also have different scopes, like infrastructure or security. There are many architectures. So, having said that, back to our case, the application for conference registrations. So we already know some requirements, and now we design, right? Which is what? Like, what do we do? So this is our input that we already worked on. And probably we have some decisions to make, right? What kind of? Yes. And okay, small digression only. Is it always architectural decision, which tools we use? Like, for example, logging library. Which one we use? Is it architectural decision? Okay, maybe it is, but is it significant? I'll get to that later. Sorry? It has to come from the user requirements to make it. Oh, yes. Yes, yeah, and that's also why the requirements part is before modeling, right? Yeah, cool. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's the next one from you. You deserve one. Yeah, thanks. All right. Is it new slide? Yes. So examples of decisions that we need to make is, for example, what payment method we use. Like, is it external provider or in-house developed? Yes, and we made some decision, doesn't matter which one, right? So after some conditions change, like it takes longer to complete or the project, or another service is implemented in-house or something better occurs on the market, we go back to that and why we made that decision, right? Anybody remembers that? Probably not. So somebody already mentioned before, documenting decisions, ADRs. And it's important, especially if you have a strong collaboration, multiple people involved, and like if it changes often, it's even more important to think this through, the process, what we should document and what we shouldn't. So how about also keeping those decisions being made in the repository? So it's easier to track changes, right, on the repository level, and it could be in plain text, it could be in Markdown, for example. So there is ADR, and this one is special here because that's not a tool, that's a document format. Yes, so we document decisions with that, and it's stored in ADL, which is architectural decision log. And it might be, for example, repository folder. And that's important to understand that those are the snapshots from time. So it's not like to be updated when you change when you continue on that path and then you change to another one, you don't change the ADR from the past. That's there to stay. That's from that moment to document why you made that decision. And you can also have different levels of the ADLs. Like on the level of a whole solution or one application, it's up to you. It's important just to know where to look for those kind of decisions. Here's an example. I know there's a lot, but let's just look at the sections. This is the stuff that should be in ADR. So it's clear for other people later, after some time, to understand why you made that decision, right? Or even for yourself, if you don't remember. You can also do it in Visual Studio Code, right? Live, because that's Markdown. Yes. Any questions? So I can see we have like 15 minutes left, and I'm somewhere in the middle, so I need to speed up. Yeah, I think I prepared too much. So what else do we produce in the design phase? Maybe some diagrams. Maybe that's something that you came here for. Yes, visuals, diagrams, what tools we use. So for diagramming, we could use paper, right? Sheet of paper, or a whiteboard, or a tablet. That's where we start. And to be clear here, you not always need to move to the next level. Sometimes it's enough. It depends what you are designing. There are some more modern tools, of course. And I mean here Microsoft Visio, for example, or Draw.io. That's something you can use. What are the notations? You can use UML. You can just simply draw boxes and arrows. Yes. Of course, there are others. You probably heard about Archimate or BPMN, or you can even use DDD. Yes. Here's an example of Draw.io. You just simply click around, right? Okay, so there are diagrams on diverse levels and layers. And what you want to achieve is to, you need to know what you want to model, right? Which level and which aspect of the system. And those diagrams provide some kind of maps that you can use to navigate in your system or ecosystem. So that helps understanding the structure and interactions. So sometimes you can stay on this Draw.io diagrams, but when it becomes a problem. Yes, for example, when it becomes bigger and bigger, right? Yes. When it becomes outdated, yes, that's always a problem. Yeah. Also, I'm not sure how long you used those kind of tools, but if you try to add and modify a lot of things on the diagram, sometimes it's a mess, and it causes the other items to move, and there becomes a chaos. So you want to avoid that. And also, you cannot check simply who made a change and when and why, right? So those are the things with those visual tools. So those are the benefits that you get when you put your diagrams in a repo as a code. Do you agree with that? Do you have any comments on this? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So because your primary question, as I heard it, was when you should update the diagrams, and my answer for that would be you always update diagrams when they contain something that has been changed in the code. So if it reflects a component that has been changed, you also update the diagram in the same commit, right? And if we have the diagrams that are not in code, they are just in repository as like images, for example, or or not even in a repository, but just like in Joe.io, for example, then it's harder. Then that's a real problem to validate that if it has been changed, yes? And also what people should be involved, right? Whose responsibility is that, yes? Yeah. It's also easier to automate things when you keep the diagrams in code. And here I mean, for example, like imagine you have configurations also in a repository, and something changes, like addresses, for example. You can have it automated to update also the addresses of machines on the diagrams. And also, how many of you heard about the strangler pattern? Yes. So I used that in one of the previous places I worked with, and we used it for transposition between the old service and the new one, and there were two aspects of that. The clients being moved, which was like, call it vertical, and also functionalities like endpoint by endpoint being modified and implemented, right? So we had those diagrams, and we automated the process of generating diagrams. So it updated itself when somebody started using new service. So we had a clear visual representation of which clients use which functionalities in the new way and in the old way. That was very cool. Okay, so also a word about the integration of the diagrams in, for example, Azure DevOps. I know that there are some issues and sometimes you need to help that automation, like with implementing webhooks, for example, and or even writing your custom process for updating the images generated from the diagram, right, to Azure DevOps. So it's not that sunshine and rainbow always. Sometimes you just need to add some more code to that, but it's possible. And okay, so our toolbox gets new members. We'll talk especially about Mermaid, but there is also Plant UML, which is on the same level, and I just use more of Mermaid, so I'll be talking more about that. But I recommend both. And yes, here are some details. And okay, so it's JavaScript based. It helps move text or markdown to diagrams and charts. Plant UML is different here because it uses UML or text notations. I have 4 minutes left, so I will just speed it up. So here are some examples of Mermaid. The code on the left. The important thing is you just need to see that there is some structure. And yes, And then there is a diagram generated on the right-hand side. That's Visual Studio Code, actually. So you just need to install add-on, and you can live model. There's another one. That's a state diagram. There is also an entity relationship diagram. There's a flowchart, a structure diagram. There's many more. Okay. So you can use them at any point in a SDLC. And how many heard the term shift left? Yeah, that's going to quality, right? Testing. But let's make a shift left for design also. You can use it on at any point in this SDLC. And the earlier, the better. Yes. How about using those diagrams on daily meetups, for example, to talk about who is working on what? Visual form, right? Worth more than 1,000 words. Yes, it also depends on the roles you are in, how you will use it. Okay, so there are some problems with those diagrams in Mermaid or Plant UML. For example, if it becomes large or more people are involved, there are multiple projects, it becomes chaos, and also there's lack of positioning modifications, which means you cannot take that box and move it to another place. So you don't have full control over how it looks like, the visual form. Yeah. And it becomes hard to understand after some time. So the solution would be what I put here in the bottom, addressing most of the points. And yeah, again about maps. So you use it as maps, right? So you sometimes need to zoom in and zoom out according to what you need from that diagram. It always should be a sweet spot between the value that it provides to you and also the amount of work that you need to make to keep it up to date. Because that's how we agree is the most important part about documentation, to be up to date, right? Yes. Moving next. C4 and structurizer. How many heard? That's a model for architecture diagramming. And structurizer is a tool created by the same guy. And it introduces four levels of diagrams. Here are those explained. So I will just show you examples. Those are from the official site. So zooming in, right? Then you have like the whole system on the first level. Then you zoom in for the contents, which is containers. Then those are components inside one container. And then the code. And you usually skip the last one because it changes too frequently. And maybe it's not the perfect place to keep those diagrams. Also the first one you sometimes skip. Here's how you do it. You just define views. Here's the code for model. There's views. And you can just switch between them. Yes. Yes, it's generated automatically from this code by the tool. Yeah. So there are additions to a structurizer. You can check it in the browser. That's the easiest way to get familiar with. And then there is a light version, which is suitable for one project. And there's no access control. And there is full version. And there are also different tools for working with C4 notation, which would be, for example, ice panel, but that's just visual, and it's expensive, as I heard. So, yeah. Mm, it does, and Mermaid also. And Mermaid also, but I know that in Mermaid it's not very adult. It's like yeah, it's not using the full potential, and I'm not sure about. Is it like? Okay, that's nice to know. So yeah, you can also check Plant UML for that. Yes. What else? Yeah, we discussed levels, and C4 is not perfect for everything. You cannot use it for dynamics, right? So it's not like C4 is a good tool for everything. It's never like that. All right, we have some bonus tracks left, and we are over time. So just run through them. You can do more things with tools I mentioned, like Mermaid. Git charts, Gantt charts, mind maps, pie charts, everything written in code, right? And also you can even write presentations. Like I don't know how many of you wrote scientific documents in LaTeX, for example, in the past. I did. That rocks. That's today's representation. So yes, our toolbox full. If you want to look at it again, and Q&A. I still have 2 bugs left. What are what?